The ship fell from the sky like a dying bird. Ethan woke up to darkness, his head spinning, smoke rising around him. The control panel was broken, sparks flying everywhere. He pulled himself out of the wreckage, his suit torn, blood on his forehead. The sky above him was purple, with 2 moons watching silently. The world was too quiet, no wind, no birds, no sound. Only his heartbeat in his ears. He took slow steps across the cracked ground, broken trees bent sideways. Their leaves black and still, a village came into view. Small houses made of metal and stone, lights flickering, but no people outside. Ethan called out, "Hello, is anyone there?" His voice echoed, but no answer came. He walked further, heart beating faster. Every step loud in the silence. Then he saw her. A girl stood at the edge of the village, watching him. She was not human. Her skin was pale blue, her hair silver and long. Her eyes large and glowing faintly. She looked scared, but didn't move. Ethan raised his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. "Hi," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." The girl opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She tried again. Nothing. She pointed at her throat, then looked down. She was mute. Ethan frowned, confused. He tried speaking again, asking where he was, who she was. But she just shook her head. Then she turned and ran. Ethan followed, not running too fast. Not wanting to scare her, she led him through the village. Past silent doors, closed windows, and empty streets. No one spoke. People were inside their homes, looking out with blank faces. Lips closed tight. No sounds. The world felt dead. The girl stopped at an old building with wires and lights around the roof. Inside was a room filled with strange machines, glowing screens, and floating words in the air. Ethan saw symbols he didn't understand, but one line kept blinking and read. One voice. One price. The girl touched a screen and showed him an image, her younger self. Smiling, talking, laughing. Then another image, her voice being taken away. A machine pulling something from her neck. She looked at him with sad eyes. Tears ran down her face, but still no sound. She touched her chest, then pointed at Ethan. Then at the screen again. She wanted to speak. She wanted his voice. Ethan stepped back, confused. He didn't understand. How could a voice be traded? The girl showed him a small device, like a glowing chip, and placed it over her throat. It did nothing. She then pointed at him and the chip, showing the machine could take a voice from one and give it to another. But only once. Ethan stood in silence. The idea hitting him slowly to give her a voice. He had to lose his own forever. He looked into her eyes, saw hope and fear mixed together. She had never hurt him, had helped him, had shown him the truth. Ethan sat down, thinking, trying to decide. Outside, the wind picked up for a second. Leaves blowing, then still again. The world was holding its breath. He stood and nodded slowly. The girl looked surprised, then stepped back, shaking her head. She didn't want to force him. But Ethan smiled gently and pointed at the machine. Then at himself. He was ready. The machine came to life, lights blinking, wires moving like snakes. It scanned Ethan's throat, and a soft light pulled something from him. He felt it like air leaving his lungs, a warm light fading from inside. Then, silence. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. He tried to say it's okay, but nothing came out. The girl took the voice chip, her hands shaking, and placed it on her neck. For a moment, nothing happened. Then she gasped, a soft sound. Then a word. "Thank you." Ethan felt tears in his eyes. His voice, now hers. The girl touched her throat, amazed, speaking small words. Testing her new gift, she looked at Ethan. Her voice now clear, his voice, and said, "They will come." Ethan frowned. Confused, The girl looked scared again, her voice trembling. They always come when a voice is traded. The lights in the building flickered. Outside, the air grew heavy. Something was watching. Something had heard. Ethan stepped to the door, his eyes searching the sky, and in the distance, he saw them shadows moving fast, too fast. The girl grabbed his hand, her voice shaking. "We have to run." Ethan nodded. No voice, no words, but full of purpose. Together, they ran into the silent world, chased by something unknown, and in the dark, the last sound was her whisper. "Thank you, asterisk." The night was quiet again, but the silence now felt heavy. Ethan and the alien girl, Lyra, ran through the silver forest, their feet crunching over dry leaves that made no sound. Even the trees didn't whisper. As if afraid to speak, Ethan breathed hard, but he couldn't hear his own voice. He had traded it, given it away. And now the voice that once belonged to him was carried by someone else. By Lyra, they stopped near an old cave, its entrance hidden behind long curtains of glowing moss. Inside, the air was damp and cold. Lyra sat down on a rock, breathing fast, looking at Ethan with wide, worried eyes. "They will search for us," she said, her voice still trembling. Still his, Ethan raised an eyebrow, silently asking who she meant. Lyra hesitated, then spoke slowly. The voice gilled. She whispered, "They own all sound on this planet." Ethan stared at her. Confused, she nodded, her face serious. "Every voice has a code," she explained. "They track it, control it. Punish those who steal it." Ethan pointed to his own throat, then to her, asking, "Is this stealing?" Lyra looked down, ashamed. "It's not your fault," she said softly. "You gave it to me." Ethan gave a small nod, but his eyes were full of questions. She took a deep breath, trying to explain. "Long ago," she began, "everyone here could speak, laugh, sing. But then the guild came, with machines that took voices and sold them." Ethan's eyes widened. "Yes," Lyra said, "they made people pay just to speak. And the poor were silenced." She touched a small chip on her neck, the one that held his voice. "They said it was to bring peace. Less noise, less anger," she continued. "But it was control. Nothing more." Outside, the wind moved softly, the moss glowing brighter as something passed by. A shadow, silent but watching. Ethan stepped quietly to the cave entrance and peered outside. Nothing, but his instincts told him they were not alone. He turned back, gestured for Lyra to keep going. She nodded and went on. "My parents tried to fight back," she said. "They hid people, helped them escape. They gave their voices to others who needed them." Her voice shook, and she paused, "But the guild found them. Took their voices forever," she whispered. "And when I was 5, they took mine too." Ethan sat beside her, his face full of silent pain. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. So he just placed a hand on her shoulder. She smiled faintly, then wiped her eyes. "I lived without a voice for years," she said. "People forget you when you're silent. Like you're not real." Ethan knew that feeling now. He tried to speak, but all that came was breath. Lyra turned to him, suddenly serious. "There is one place," she said, "where we might find answers." Ethan looked up, curious. She reached into her small satchel and pulled out a glowing crystal disc. "This," she said, "is from the old world, before the guild. It holds data about the first humans who visited this planet." Ethan's eyes lit up with surprise. "There was a human scientist," Lyra said. "He came here a long time ago, tried to help us fight the guild, but he vanished." She pressed the crystal against the cave wall, and a blue light spread across the stone. A map appeared, showing mountains, ruins, towers, and one red circle deep in the north. "That's where his lab is," she whispered. "But no one has returned from there." Ethan stood up slowly, determination in his eyes. He pointed to the map, then to himself and her. Lyra nodded, understanding. "We'll go," she said, together, suddenly. A soft humming filled the cave. Both froze. The moss turned red. The air buzzed with invisible waves. Lyra gasped. "They're scanning for voices," she said. "They're close." Ethan quickly shut off the crystal map. The light fading, they packed up and slipped out of the cave. Staying low, moving silently above them. Silver drones flew past, glowing like fireflies. One of them stopped, hovered, scanning the ground. Ethan and Lyra pressed themselves against the roots of a fallen tree. Holding their breath, the drone made a clicking sound. Then moved on. Ethan let out a quiet exhale. Lyra looked at him and whispered, "They won't stop until they take it back your voice." Ethan nodded. Eyes burning with fire. He didn't care about the voice anymore. He cared about her, about what the guild had done. And he was ready to fight, even without words. He would make sure they were heard, even if he had to stay silent forever. They walked into the dark forest, toward the red circle on the map. Toward the forgotten lab. Toward the truth. And behind them, in the shadows. The voice guild watched, waiting, listening. Ethan and Lyra moved closer to the city, where the voice guild stood like a crown over everything. Tall towers pierced the sky, glass and metal catching the pale moons. Lights pulsed like heartbeats. People hurried past. Their faces calm, their lips sealed, some with small chips behind their ears. Ethan noticed guards with shiny helmets, their eyes cold. Their hands resting on strange devices, they did not speak. But their silence felt loud and dangerous. Lyra tugged Ethan's hand and pointed to a narrow door beneath a tower. A door no taller than a person. She squeezed his fingers and mouthed. "This way." In a tiny, urgent voice, they slipped inside a dark hall lined with portraits of important guild members. Eyes painted as if to watch, a red carpet ran to a heavy door where a woman sat behind glass. Her face stern, her eyes kind in a way that made Ethan uneasy. She spoke without moving her lips, words floating in the air as small lights. "State your need," the air repeated. Lyra stepped forward and pointed at her throat. Then to Ethan, then to the chip on her neck, her hands shaking. Ethan put his hand on his chest and tried to speak for the first time since the trade. But no sound came. The woman behind the glass nodded slowly and pressed a panel. The door opened with a long hiss. Inside the room, machines lined the walls like soldiers, tubes and wires coiling, lights blinking in slow patterns. A low hum filled the air, like a beast that slept and woke when fed. A tall man in a black coat came forward. He wore a small crown of metal. His fingers light on a tablet that showed faces and codes. He looked at Ethan with interest, as if reading a book, then at Lyra with a softer gaze. "You traded your voice," he said. And the words came as music in Ethan's head, not through his mouth. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He could not reply. But he held Lyra's gaze, steady and sure. The man touched a panel on the wall, and a small glass box hovered forward. Inside, a blue light moved like a tiny sun. "This is the exchange," the man said, "once the code is moved. It cannot return." Lyra put her hand on the box and closed her eyes. The light touched her skin and made small sparks. Ethan watched, remembering how the light had left him at the first trade. Leaving a hollow, warm place in his throat, the man spoke quietly. "We keep order, so voices remain valuable. Some pay, some beg. Some die silent." Lyra's face grew pale. She squeezed Ethan's fingers until his knuckles hurt. He thought of his home, of his small room with tools and maps, of people who laughed and argued with sound. And he wondered if he had done the right thing. Then Lyra smiled a little and mouthed, "Thank you," the sound clear in Ethan's mind, though he could not hear it. The man watched them, his eyes sharp. "You understand the law," he said. One voice for one life. The donor loses speech. The receiver gains it fully, but the exchange must be balanced. Lyra nodded. Tears in her eyes, and the man gestured to a chair with straps. Old and comfortable, as if it were part of a ritual, they sat. And the machine hummed louder. A cold breeze touched Ethan's neck, and he felt the world tilt. A thin glass plate lowered to his throat. It smelled like rain and old metal, and lights scanned him. Mapping the pattern of breath and bone, he watched Lyra through the machine. Her hands trembling, eyes wide, full of hope and terror. The technician touched a lever, and the machine inhaled a soft note. And Ethan felt the same warm light again, sliding up like honey. Then leaving, his mouth moved, but no sound came. His name was a memory in the air. Gone, Lyra reached for the chip when it appeared. Like a jewel, glowing with his pattern. She placed it at her throat, and the machine sealed it with a soft click. The light sang a small tone. For a moment, nothing happened, and Ethan thought the trade had failed. But then Lyra gasped, and a single word left her lips, clear as a bell. "Thank you." The word fell into him like a warm stone. Into the place where his voice had been, and his eyes blurred, Lyra tested sounds. Small words that had not left her before. "Hello, friend," she tried, and the voice trembled but held. Ethan watched her speak and felt joy and pain at once. Joy because she had voice, pain because he had traded his. The man in the coat smiled thinly. "The exchange is complete," he said. But his voice had an edge that made the air grow colder. Lyra hugged Ethan, her arms tight, and whispered, "I will protect it," into his mind with her new sound. They left the room with papers signed and a small token that proved the trade. A thin strip of metal with a code etched into it. Outside, the city seemed the same, but Ethan felt the world change around him. Like a painting turned, colors different, lines sharper. People glanced at Lyra as she walked. Some eyes narrowed, others looked away, but none spoke to her. As if her voice was a light they feared. That night they hid in a small, empty bakery. Bread left to stale, a single candle in the window. Lyra sat across from Ethan, playing with the token, and laughing softly at nothing. Her voice familiar now, but as she laughed, a whisper threaded through her words, a ghostly echo that did not come from her. A second voice that touched the edges of her speech. Ethan felt a cold prickle on his skin. He leaned closer, though he could not hear. And Lyra's face went pale. The laughter died. "They know," she said at last. Her voice small and sharp, and her eyes filled with fear. Ethan put a hand on the token, feeling its cool metal, and understood the truth without words. The exchange had given life, but it had also left a mark. And something terrible had noticed the move, and would not forgive it. Asterisk, the morning air was thick like fog. Even though the sky was clear, Ethan and Lyra left the abandoned bakery before the city woke. The token from the guild stayed in Lyra's pocket. Cold and silent, but something had changed. Something they both could feel. Lyra's voice, Ethan's voice, was no longer alone inside her. Each time she spoke, a faint echo followed. Like a shadow behind a word. Sometimes it was only a breath. Sometimes it whispered something else entirely. Ethan couldn't hear it, but Lyra could, and it scared her. They walked toward the ruins of the old world, deep in the wilderness. That's where the map from the crystal disk had pointed. The trees out here were different, taller. Older, their bark marked with strange lines. Birds moved in the branches, but made no sound. It was like the whole planet had learned to stay quiet. Ethan stopped often to check behind them. He felt eyes, even when there were none. Lyra spoke only when she had to. Each word she used felt borrowed. Like it wasn't hers to say, she tried whispering. Then humming, then silence. But the second voice stayed with her, always waiting. Sometimes it said things she didn't understand. Sometimes it spoke before she did. They found shelter in an old bunker. Half buried under vines, Ethan pulled the door open with effort. Rust and time fighting back. Inside were broken lights, old tools, and a desk full of cracked screens. Dust danced in the light from the open hatch. Lyra touched a switch, and one screen flickered on. A human face appeared, dulled, tired, eyes sharp. "This is Dr. Elias Brand," the voice said from the screen. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes wide. "I came to this world to stop the Guild," the man continued. "They've learned to trap sound, to use voices like keys. Like weapons." Lyra and Ethan looked at each other, both thinking the same thing, the second voice. The echo was not an error. It was something the Guild had made. Something buried in the code, a trap. Dr. Brand's message kept playing. "I tried to build a machine to break their control," he said. "But they found me before I finished it. They sent them." The screen flickered, static, buzzing for a moment. Then Brand leaned closer, his voice lower. "If you're hearing this, it means someone made a trade." He stared into the camera. Like he was looking through time. "Be warned," he said. "The voice hunters will come." The screen went black. Lyra backed away slowly, hand on her throat. "I think they already have," she said, her voice trembling suddenly. The door to the bunker slammed shut. Even though no wind had moved, lights went out, one by one. Ethan drew his small blade, more for courage than use. The walls hummed with pressure, and then, from the shadows, something moved, tall, smooth, dark as glass, a creature with no eyes, no mouth, only a metal ring around its neck. It didn't walk, it floated, and when it spoke, it was in Ethan's voice. "Found you," it said. Lyra gasped, frozen in place. Ethan stepped in front of her, fists clenched, heart racing. The creature tilted its head like it was studying him. It repeated the words again, the same tone, the same breath. "Found you," Lyra whispered. "It's not Realis, just using your voice pattern." Ethan didn't move. But his mind spun. How did it speak with his voice when he couldn't anymore? The answer chilled him. His voice wasn't only given. It was copied. The creature hovered closer. And Lyra stepped back. She touched her chip. "Tried to speak, stop," she said, but the voice echoed back with a second tone, twisted. "Sharp, stop," it repeated mockingly. The creature raised a hand, and from its fingers came a wave of sound. Not loud, but deep. The walls cracked, the air shook. The machine sparked. Ethan grabbed Lyra and they dove behind the desk. "Metal sprayed like knives," Lyra shouted. "It's tracking the voice code mine." "Yours, it's following the sound." Ethan understood. He grabbed a broken speaker from the desk and threw it across the room. It clattered loudly, and the creature turned toward it instantly. Ethan pointed to the back door, eyes urgent. They ran, breaking through the rusted hatch and into the trees again. Behind them, the bunker shook with a low hum. But the creature didn't follow yet. In the silence of the forest, Lyra dropped to her knees, her voice shaking as she whispered, "That wasn't the only one." Ethan looked to the sky. Drones blinked red between the clouds, lines of code trailing like smoke. "They sent more," she said. "They're hunting every voice that's been traded." Ethan stared at her, his eyes full of questions he couldn't ask. Lyra knew what he meant. "I think they need the voices to open something," she said. "A door, or a weapon." In the distance, another sound cut the silence. Not natural, not soft mechanical wings. Clicking feet. Hunters. Ethan helped her up, and they ran again. Not just to survive now, but to find Dr. Brand's hidden lab, the last place where answers might live. Because if the Guild could use Ethan's voice for monsters, what else were they planning to say? The road to the old mountains was broken and wild. Roots cracked through the stones, and vines covered forgotten signs. Ethan and Lyra moved carefully. Away from paths where drones might fly, the voice hunters were still searching. Silent as shadows, but deadly as fire. Each day, Lyra spoke less. Afraid her voice might lead them to danger, they climbed for hours before reaching a metal gate hidden in stone. Rust covered the walls, but symbols glowed faintly on the surface. Ethan brushed away dirt and dust, revealing a strange shape, a human handprint. Surrounded by alien writing, he placed his hand on it, and the gate hissed open inside. The air smelled old and dry, like time had been locked away. This was the lab from Dr. Brand's message. The lights inside flickered awake as they walked in. Machines buzzed slowly, like they had been asleep for a long time. A single message blinked on a screen. If you can read this? It's not too late. Ethan sat by the console and touched a switch. A hologram of Dr. Brand appeared, older and tired. I failed to stop them, the recording said. But I built something they fear a signal strong enough to break the voice codes. Lyra stepped forward, her voice low. Where is it? She asked. The hologram answered, hidden beneath this lab, but it needs power. It needs many voices to activate. Ethan looked at Lyra, a question in his eyes. How could they gather so many voices in a world that had been silenced? Lyra's hands trembled. There is one group, she said. One that still resists the guild. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a broken pin. Shaped like a flame, they live underground. Under the old city my parents once helped them. Ethan nodded. Determination growing, they packed what they could. Stored Brand's message and left the mountain behind. Their path led to the ruins of a forgotten city. Once tall and bright, now buried in dust and memory. They climbed down into tunnels hidden below broken streets. There in the dark, they found them, men and women with scars and silent eyes. Children who had never spoken a word in their lives. But all of them carried symbols, red flames painted on their jackets. Lyra stepped forward, raised her voice carefully. My name is Lyra, she said, and I carry a voice that was freely given. The crowd shifted, surprised to hear sound in the deep. One older woman stepped out, her eye covered by metal. I haven't heard speech in 20 years, she said slowly. Whose voice is that? Lyra touched her neck. A human named Ethan, she replied. He gave it to me so I could speak for those who can't. Ethan stepped beside her. Silent but proud, the rebels stared at him with awe. A human. Voiceless but fearless. We found Dr. Brand's lab, Lyra continued. He built a signal that can break the guild's control, but we need many voices to power it. The woman crossed her arms. Thinking you want to make noise in a world trained to whisper? She asked. Lyra nodded. I want 2 free voices. A long silence followed, then a soft laugh. The woman nodded slowly. Then let's make the world scream, she said. The rebels began preparing. Old tech was dragged out. Cables uncoiled, radios fixed. Lyra helped wire up transmitters while Ethan drew maps, signaling safe paths and guard routes. That night, the rebels gathered around a long table. Ethan watched from the corner, eyes on each face. He couldn't speak. But they looked at him like he had said everything already. A young boy walked up to him, holding a tiny recorder. My mother said, you gave your voice away, he whispered. Ethan nodded once. The boy smiled. That's the bravest thing I've ever heard. At sunrise, they moved, a quiet army, climbing from tunnels into the broken city. Each one carried an old microphone, speaker, or signal booster. Their plan was simple. Connect all transmitters to one source, Dr. Brand's signal. Lyra and Ethan climbed the highest tower, wind cutting through the broken walls. Below, the rebels set up gear, hands shaking but determined. The older woman's voice came through a small radio. We're ready. Whenever you are, Lyra looked at Ethan. He handed her the activation key. The final piece, she placed it into the console. And the machine came to life. A deep hum spread through the walls. "Say something," Ethan wrote on a notepad. Lyra took a deep breath, tears in her eyes. "This is for the voices you stole," she said. Her words shaking the air. "For the mothers, the children. The old ones you silenced, for the ones who died unheard." She pressed the final button. The tower exploded with sound, not noise, but voices, thousands of them. Recorded cries, messages, laughs, memories. All released at once in one powerful wave. The sky lit up as the signal reached the guild's control towers. Circuits failed, machines sparked. Voice chips shattered across the world. People opened their mouths and found sound again. Real voice says raw, imperfect, alive in the silence that followed. Ethan stood at the top of the tower. His voice was still gone. But his message had been heard, and in that moment, he had never felt louder. The sky above the guild's capital turned red. Not from fire, but from sound, all across the planet. Towers cracked and lights failed. People looked up and touched their throats in wonder. They could speak again. Whispers turned into words. Words turned into shouts. The silence was broken. But in the heart of the voice, Guild's citadel. One tower still stood, untouched, glowing with blue fire. The main frequency core, the last stronghold of control. Ethan stood beside Lyra as the tower blinked in the distance. Below them, the rebels celebrated, but Ethan knew it wasn't over. The signal they sent had freed many, but not all. Some voices remained locked. Lost inside codes too deep to break, the guild had hidden a final frequency, one that could override all others. And only the original traded voice could reach it. Ethan's voice, Lyra felt it too. Each time she spoke now, the second voice grew louder. It wasn't just an echo anymore. It was alive. It called to the guild. And the guild answered, "We have to go," she said. Holding Ethan's hand tightly, he nodded. No hesitation, no fear. The journey to the final tower was quiet. Too quiet. No guards, no drones. Only long shadows and strange lights in the sky. It felt like the world was watching them, judging them, or waiting for something as they stepped into the final hall. The door opened on its own. Cold air brushed their faces. Inside, machines hovered like ghosts. Floating wires pulsed with blue energy. And at the center stood him, the voice guild's master. His body was covered in silver armor. But his face was smooth, too smooth, no mouth. No eyes, no ears, only a flat surface, like polished glass. He turned toward them. Though he had no eyes, and when he spoke, it was with Ethan's voice. "You have come to silence the silence," he said. Lyra's hands clenched. "That voice doesn't belong to you," she said. The master tilted his head. "All voices belong to the guild," he replied. "They are power, order, weaponry." Ethan stepped forward. Shaking his head slowly, the master moved closer. "You gave it away, human," he said. "But a voice given is a door opened." A panel rose from the ground. Pulsing with light, Ethan felt something pull at him. The frequency chip on Lyra's neck glowed. She gasped, grabbing her throat. "It's trying to pull the voice back," she said. Ethan reached out to stop it. But the energy pushed him back. The master raised his hand. "Only the original owner can activate the final frequency," he said. "And once it plays, the world will kneel again." Ethan stood slowly. Face calm, but eyes burning. He looked at Lyra and pointed to her voice chip, then at the machine. She understood the guild wanted to use his voice one last time to lock the planet again. But they had a choice. There was still power left in the chip. Enough to send one final signal. A destruction signal. Lyra held Ethan's hand, tears in her eyes. "If I do this, she whispered. "I'll lose your voice forever." Ethan smiled gently, then wrote something on a nearby screen. "Better silence than slavery," she nodded and turned to the console. The master moved quickly, trying to stop her. But Ethan stepped in front of him. No weapons, no sound, just will. The machine screamed with energy as Lyra pressed the override button. The chip burned hot against her skin. She screamed not in pain, but in freedom. The tower shook, walls cracked, machines sparked and fell. The master let out a strange, broken sound. A noise that didn't belong to any language. His body twisted, lost control. The smooth face shattered, revealing only darkness inside. And then silence, real silence, not forced, not stolen, just peace. The tower collapsed behind them as they ran outside. Flames climbed toward the sky. The last control node was gone. Ethan dropped to his knees. Breathless Lyra crouched beside him, her throat bleeding softly where the chip had burned away. She tried to speak, but no sound came. She looked at him, her lips forming the words. "Thank you," he nodded, and for the first time. He wasn't sad to hear nothing. The quiet felt full, not empty. All across the world, people found their voices. Some sang, some cried, some laughed for the first time in years. But Lyra and Ethan stayed silent, side by side. Two souls who had once traded a voice, now free from its weight. They had broken the last chain, not with weapons, but with choice and the world. For the first time in a long time, belonged to the people again. Asterisk, the tower was gone, where it once stood. Only smoke and light remained, a pillar of silence in a world finally free to speak. The final signal had burned through every control line, every guild chip, every cage of sound. Now the people could speak with their own voices again. And yet, high on the hill above the smoking ruins, two souls sat without words. Ethan and Lyra watched the rising sun. Their eyes full of memory. Lyra touched her throat gently. The skin still marked where the voice chip had melted. She tried to whisper, but no sound came. The voice was Ethan's voice. The one she had carried, the one she had freed. She turned to him, eyes wet. Her mouth formed the words he had once given her. "Thank you," Ethan smiled, nodding slowly. No voice returned. But his eyes spoke louder than any sound. Around them, the world was changing. Villagers climbed from their homes and spoke aloud for the first time in years. Laughter rose through the air, awkward and wild. Children ran, shouting names just to hear the sound. Old people cried. Listening to their own voices like music from the past, the rebellion had become something else. A new beginning, not just for those who fought, but for those who had forgotten how to speak. Ethan and Lyra walked through the city slowly. Strangers stopped and bowed their heads to them. No one knew their names, but everyone had heard the story of a human who gave his voice, and a girl who used it not for power, but for one word, thank you. They reached the center of the ruins. The guild symbol had fallen, cracked in half on its broken surface. Someone had painted new words. All voices matter. Lyra looked around. She felt the air without fear now. No more scans, no more echoes, just wind, birds, and breath. In the distance, a signal tower sparked to life. But this one was different, built by the people, not the guild. A message played across it in many voices. Human and alien, we remember those who were silent, it said. We honor those who gave their voices to light the way. Ethan stood before it, listening to the voice that once was his. It had been recorded, shared, passed from village to village. A sound now greater than him, a sound that belonged to everyone. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder and pointed to a small garden nearby. A group of children were planting flowers. They were singing, not perfect, not trained, but free. One of the children, a little girl with green skin and bright blue eyes. Ran over, she looked at Ethan and held out a flower. He took it gently. She looked confused. "Why don't you talk?" she asked. Lyra knelt beside her and whispered. "Because he gave his voice to save us all." The little girl's eyes grew wide. She stepped back, then bowed deeply. "Thank you," she said, loud and clear. The other children joined her, one by one. "Thank you," they all said, and Ethan, silent in body but loud in heart, felt something deep inside shift. He looked at Lyra, and she smiled, even without sound. They had done what no weapon could. They had changed the world. That evening, as the stars appeared, the people lit fires and shared stories. Some sang for the first time, others just sat in silence. Holding hands, breathing together, Lyra sat close to Ethan and opened the old notebook he had used. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote slowly, "Do you regret giving your voice away?" Ethan read the question, then took the pen and wrote beneath it, "Not even for a second." She wiped a tear and wrote one more thing. "You didn't just give it to me. Ethan, you gave it to everyone." He looked at her, then pointed to the sky. The stars blinked like tiny voices, scattered but shining, each one holding a story. Each one holding a song somewhere deep in the stars. Others would hear this story of a man who gave his voice, and of a girl who carried it to light, and maybe, just maybe, others would believe in humans again. Not because of strength, not because of war, but because of something more powerful than both a choice to care. Lyra leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, and in the quiet, filled with wind, fire, and joy, she formed the words one last time, with no sound at all. "Thank you." And even though he couldn't say it back, she knew he had always meant to. The world had its voice again, and Ethan had his peace.